Nebraska's starting to have a better time in the portal. We'll catch you up with it coming up.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel. Right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com and get started.
Okay, welcome in. It is Monday, the Monday before Christmas holiday week. Everybody's schedules are messed up, including ours. We're taping this show around noon on this Monday. Sorry for the delay, but I had some travel to take care of. I'm back in the friendly confines of Nebraska. In a few days, I'll be on my way to New York. So it's a wild month in that realm, and been pretty wild for Nebraska, Connor, in the transfer portal. Huskers are up to 9 transfer portal additions. I will ask this question at the start. Has Nebraska done enough in the transfer portal before Christmas?
I don't know. I guess there's no deadline, right? Well, I mean, you just
the visits. This is a break because the visits are shut down.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess to the layperson, they only care about having it all ready to roll by next August, which I suppose they've done enough by now. I certainly feel, I'll say this, I feel better about it now than I did 2 weeks ago or a week ago. And we were having those discussions about, how big of a hill they needed to climb and sort of the quality of player that they needed. I think they've locked down. We're going to talk about each of these guys here coming up, but I think they've locked down a starter at wide receiver. I think they've locked down a starter in the defensive backfield. You're still trying to search for an offensive lineman or two that could probably start for you next year. You've gotten kind of the backup quarterback situation all cleared up and straightened out. So I think they've checked a lot of boxes and they're well on their way to having a successful portal run here.
Yeah, if Nebraska could get a Christmas Eve offensive tackle, then I think everyone's holiday around the state of Nebraska who follows Nebraska football would be fine. That's hanging out there. And from what I would say is Nebraska has done what it needs to do before the break here. So Sunday, yesterday, was the end of visits. And there were some visitors who were in Lincoln that we may know about, that we may not know about, and decisions could still be coming this week with the holiday. In fact, these guys are heading home to their families. They're not on campuses visiting here during the week of Christmas. So it's possible that you'll see some decisions, maybe more likely to have decisions made here this week when these players are back at home. But 9, like we said, and lacking on the offensive line. Everywhere else that Nebraska has needed to fill needs, it has done that. But that when things start back up in January, with or without an offensive line addition here in the week of Christmas, even if they were to get one, the focus, one of the big focuses, if not the biggest focus, is going to be on finding an offensive lineman. We'll talk about that maybe at the end of the second segment or early in the third segment of this show. But let's review what Nebraska's done, please, Connor, since we last talked. So we had a show on Friday when I was in Louisville for the volleyball, and we talked about Isaiah Hunter, the wide receiver from Cal, who came in on Thursday night. Since then, Nebraska has added Marcos Davila as a quarterback from Purdue, Justyn Rhett as a safety from Georgia, and former Oklahoma and Indiana linebacker Dasan McCullough. So I think we should start with Davila. This one fills a need. Not somebody who you expect to see playing a lot next season, knock on wood. Dylan Raiola is healthy through his sophomore season, but Nebraska needed a quarterback, another quarterback for that group.
Yeah, I think it's I wondered at first sort of what the sell would be to a guy to come in and be Dylan Raiola. I mean, because that's what you're doing, right? You're coming to be Dylan Raiola's backup, but you could frame it in whichever way you'd like. Pretty highly recruited guy. I think Purdue was really happy to get him in the last cycle, and redshirted. And he's from Texas, and he played high quality at competition, and he's got a really good arm. And I've watched some of his stuff. Like
he's
this
put together too.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's a good looking athlete.
6'3", 230. I mean, yeah, he's a big kid. So this is probably like at the higher end of what I felt like Nebraska could end up getting for this specific position at that specific time. So credit to them for doing that and selling them on the selling Marcos on the Marcos on the idea that he could
what's a good pronunciation
and develop and learn under Dylan Raiola and maybe play, obviously, you're going to go through seasons where you need two quarterbacks. So love the ad. It absolutely fills a need perfectly.
Yeah. I felt like going into this, that this could have been an FCS guy that Nebraska ended up getting, maybe a lower level group of 5 quarterback. So to go and get someone from the Big Ten who was recruited by multiple schools a year ago, multiple Power 5, Power 4 schools a year ago out of Midland, Texas, that's a win. And I think what this boils down to is that Dana Holgorsen had a relationship. So Dana Holgorsen coaching at Houston a little over a year ago, and Davila is in that 2024 class cycle. And Holgorsen, before he was fired, was in the mix for Davila, and Davila ended up, of course, signing with Purdue, but he was looking hard at Houston. So you have that you can go back to, and there's already some comfort level there on the part of this quarterback to know what kind of an offensive coordinator he's playing for. And I think, honestly, like maybe we make a bigger deal out of the fact that Nebraska has Dylan Raiola than a player like this does, because, he's got more eligibility, one, and then two, these guys, they see the transient nature of college football. Like they understand that, I mean, being the number 2 quarterback in December, like if Nebraska was going to make a depth chart right now projecting 2025, you'd put Davila at number 2, ahead of TJ Lateef, the incoming freshman, who's going to be on campus maybe now. He may have been, I think he was on the plane to New York that left Lincoln on Monday morning. Huskers are just getting into New York this afternoon, by the way, for a week of fun activity in the Big Apple. Nice weather out there in the Big Apple. I checked on that today. Like we're in the 30s and rising up to the 40s as the week goes on. So, but Davila would be the number 2 guy. And that's a pretty good spot to be in. He was 3 at Purdue this year. So you come into that, have a coach you're comfortable with. And I think that's an attractive spot.
Yeah. I just usually think, and maybe we put too big of a blanket over these things with college athletes these days, but they look at it and he's a highly recruited player and he'll look around and say, well, I want to go to a place where we could start. But to be fair, like you said, Mitch, there's only so many starting spots before we're talking about dropping down a level. So maybe there's this now realization among people like Marcos Davila who are like, well, I know that I can be and will be a good player. I got to find the right spot and a spot that's advantageous for me, and then wait my turn. So, I mean, and like you said, who knows? Like, if you're penciling him in, Marcos Davila, to be the quarterback in 2 years after Dylan Raiola completes, his time at Nebraska and Dylan is off to the NFL or whatever. I don't know. Who knows what the hell this thing is going to look like in 2 years? I don't.
Yeah. Yeah, you think like week to week, month to month, like even season to season is too far down the road. But Marcos Davila could have any number of paths to being a quarterback that Nebraska needs very badly in a short period of time or in like an intermediate period of time. It's I think as long as he's in a system that he likes and has a coach that he likes, then he's feeling good about that. So the other thing that this does is it allows you to fully commit to having Heinrich Haarberg go play the tight end position. Like you can change his position on the Nebraska roster on Huskers.com and all your spreadsheets, Connor. You can put him at tight end. He's a tight end. Like, no more quarterback for Heinrich Haarberg, with Davila coming in January and Latif coming in January. That's it. Like, Heinrich is going to focus on a different position, and that's something that is good for Nebraska football and the Nebraska offense and Dana Holgorsen too.
Yeah, you can start to train his body in a different way too. Wouldn't surprise me if Heinrich Haarberg came back in the, when we see him next in the spring and he's 15, 20 pounds heavier or something like that. It puts on a whole bunch of muscle, right? Because he's big, he's got a big frame. He hasn't completely filled it out. I think purposefully, because as a quarterback, you want to keep some of that, the nimbleness and the athleticism and the twitchiness, I suppose. So yeah, let's go. Load Heinrich Haarberg up, turn him into a big, beefy man, and let him catch passes at tight end.
Is he Santa Claus, or what's going on here?
I don't know. Maybe he's gonna eat his cookies, and then we'll see him in the spring, and he's like, whoa, what's going on, Heinrich? Nice.
So this week, Heinrich's still playing some quarterback. Like, after I said all of that, no Davila in the Pinstripe Bowl. Latif, he can be there. He's not playing. He can't play in the Pinstripe Bowl. So Nebraska needs Haarberg and Jalen Gramstad also to be ready to go at quarterback if something happens with Dylan this week. So, all right. When we come back, we're going to talk about those transfers that Nebraska has added from the SEC, one from Georgia and one from Oklahoma. So brand name schools, big time players. That's coming up next. All right, I've got a question here. Do you have any subscriptions that you've forgotten or you might be overpaying for? I think everyone can answer that question with a resounding yes. Rocket Money, they make it easy to track down all of them. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions. It monitors your spending. It helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place. Subscriptions, spending habits, goals you want to hit this year as you go into 2025. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions, reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on today. rocketmoney.com/locked-on. Do it today.
All right, welcome back. Connor Happer here, and Mitch Sherman as well. The week of Christmas. Certainly appreciate you guys spending
happy holidays
with us. Yes, happy holidays. Mitch is going to be out on the road again covering the Pinstripe Bowl, so we'll have some sort of weird setup for a podcast at some point this week, right?
Yeah, I think we'll do a Christmas Eve show. So tomorrow maybe we should do something fun on Christmas Eve. Like, what do you want to find under your tree other than a 330-pound offensive tackle if you're Nebraska football?
Well, we didn't do we skipped Festivus today. The feats of strength. You could file your complaints about people. The poll. We didn't do any of that.
Okay. Well, we'll try to incorporate that into the Christmas Eve. I don't know. Maybe we should stay away from Christmas Eve for Festivus. I don't know that we'll do a show on Wednesday, but we'll definitely be with you on Thursday and then getting out to New York. I'll be heading to New York on Friday. I can do a show from Central Park, perhaps. What do you think?
Interesting. I'm intrigued. Yes.
I don't know how that would work. If there's power, if there's internet,
I got Wi-Fi out there. It's fine.
Yeah, I don't know. I can go to Nebraska's hotel and hang out in the lobby and see who comes through. Maybe we could get Matt Rhule on the show. Like, what?
I think you would love that.
I'm over promising here. That's not likely to happen this week, but
you never know.
Saturday will be the trip to Yankee Stadium, and we'll bring you some preview and some reaction. We're actually going to talk about a football game at some point this week.
At some point. So stay tuned. You never know what you might see here this week in the Locked On Nebraska podcast. So we talk about Marcos Davila, the quarterback commitment to Nebraska out of the transfer portal from Purdue. That was not all. A couple more that we should talk about here. Big addition. So when you pair Davila along with Neziah Hunter from Cal, those are two pretty big pickups on the offensive side. Defensively, straight to the defensive backfield. Justyn Rhett is a transfer from Georgia, where he spent the last couple of years and hasn't really played much. He sort of fits in the mold that MJ Sherman did when he got here, and he ended up being a pretty productive player at Nebraska for a couple of years. And then Dasan McCullough is, I think, by far the most interesting player that Nebraska's got out of the portal so far. Super athletic, has played at all three levels of the defense. I think factors in as an immediate starter on the defensive side of the ball, transfer from Oklahoma. It's just sort of where do you put him and where do you line him up? So pretty interesting stuff there.
You know who he's going to be really good for if he stays on the defensive side is Jeremiah Jones, the signee from this month, who's considered just a very versatile athlete. I mean, there's talk he could play offense, but I think more projections on the defensive side. He's the player that Nebraska had to recruit all the way down to the last minute to keep away from Missouri. McCullough is a guy that I think that's similar in size, but then he has the experience that Jones would of course be lacking. 1 year is the eligibility on McCullough, correct? He played at Indiana as a true freshman, was a freshman All-American, according to the Athletic. So take that for what it's worth. No, I'm sure it was a great selection. And then 23, he started 7 games at OU and missed 5 games this year because of injury, but has been a factor for the Sooners on defense.
I'm sure, Mitch, there's a way he could get a year back somewhere.
Right. Just go to court.
Fake. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's part of this Kansas City connection too, because McCullough spent 3 years of his high school career at Blue Valley North. So you immediately think Jamar Mosey, who's just the gift that keeps on giving. I may have used that term previously. I'll use it again for Matt Rhule in Nebraska as the Huskers reshape things on the roster here going into 2025. But all of the Kansas City connections that Nebraska has with Isaiah Mosey and Williams Nwaneri, another portal ad with Dawson Merritt, they all go back to Mosey in one way or another. Juju Marks, the offensive lineman from Kansas, the Kansas City area. And a lot of them are oddly connected to the Kansas City Chiefs, which is also the case with McCullough. His father, Dasan McCullough, is the Notre Dame running backs coach. He was the Indiana running backs coach. He coached for both of those CFP teams. Interesting. And was the Kansas City Chiefs running backs coach when Dasan was in high school. One of the most interesting human interest stories you will ever read about sports involves Dasan McCullough, the father of Nebraska's newest defensive player. If you don't know it, just search it on ESPN. There was a whole documentary and incredible article devoted to this and about how he spent his whole life not knowing who his father was, and then later found out this would be Dasan's grandfather and his father. So having a Husker connection to that story is exciting to me, and hope to get to meet Dasan at some point. Although he's fairly busy right now as the Irish advance through the CFP.
Yeah, that's another thing we should probably end up talking about at some point this week. All the narratives from over the weekend in the college football playoff, but we don't probably have the 10 minutes to cover it today. But no, I mean the Chiefs to Huskers connection is now very, very real. You have Terry Braden, who was the assistant defensive line coach in the Chiefs last year. You have this connection with Dave Merritt, who's Dawson Merritt's dad. And he seems to be friendly with just about everybody at all. And now McCullough and all of their kids are in the Kansas City area and playing football. And
who's Nebraska going to get next year from Kansas City in the 26 cycle because of this? Like this is it's like the faucet has turned on.
And I'll remind people that Kansas City recently, within the last 4 or 5 years here, has gone through like this really big resurgence as far as high profile Power 5 football prospects are concerned. A whole bunch of them went to Michigan. A whole bunch of them like like really super highly recruited across the country. And this is going on a few years now. So I don't know, like, you might get guys the first time. And obviously Nebraska has some super nice roots there in the Kansas City metro area now, but also, I mean, transfer portal guys, that faucet is not completely shut off at any point in time, I don't think.
My brain is circulating here, and I'm trying to craft the way for Bobby Witt Jr. to incorporate himself into this world, so we can get him to a Nebraska game. I mean, maybe he'll be at a Nebraska game. Oh, the Royals are in town the weekend that Nebraska opens the season. Against Cincinnati. Are they coming back into town on that Thursday? They play on Friday. So is it an off day?
It is an off day. They play on Wednesday in Chicago. They'll be in town with an off day free.
How is this going to happen? Like,
yeah,
Alex Gordon will be there at Arrowhead.
I would assume so. I would assume you could get him over there for that. Wearing some Nebraska stuff.
He's going to be there for sure. Like, he's probably going to bang the drum. What's the thing that the Chiefs do up on the top of the stadium before every game? Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about that more later in the summer when that thing gets closer in August. Hey, let's talk quickly as we finish this segment, or let's come back in the next segment and get more to Justyn Rhett, the safety transfer from Georgia, and what he could potentially add for the Nebraska defense in 2025. That's coming up next.
All right, it's Tapper here for the FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it is not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. We are ramping it up right now. $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And it's not just the spreads. It's not just the over-unders. It's not just the totals on football games, but you also can bet on first-time touchdown scorers, anytime touchdown scorers. So who will score a touchdown in a given game, when touchdowns will happen. Heck, if you would have been betting on a certain game in the NFL over the last couple of weeks, there was a game on a primetime window that didn't have a touchdown at all. You could bet on that, and you get pretty good odds on the FanDuel Sportsbook. And that is, of course, not all. Plenty of things to check out. Head to FanDuel today, FanDuel.com, for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Once again, that's if that first $5 bet wins. Get started now and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Okay, finishing up on this Monday afternoon edition of the Locked On Nebraska podcast. I'm Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone is with me. So we finished up talking about the Kansas City connection and Dasan McCullough, Nebraska's new linebacker. Expect him to come in and just be a plug-and-play kind of player where he can start and add some experience to that Nebraska linebacker group. Will be, I think, excellent for Willis McGahee, for Vincent Shavers, for some of those young linebackers like Christian Jones and the aforementioned Dawson Merritt. We'll see if Javen Wright can get a 7th year of eligibility to be a part of that too. But Huskers look like they've filled that important need for Rob Dvorak and Phil Simpson, how they break down coaching that group. So a younger player from Las Vegas, Bishop Gorman, spent 2 years actually in Athens, Georgia, playing for the Georgia Bulldogs or as a reserve, mostly for the Georgia Bulldogs. Justyn Rhett hit the portal. He's out of the SEC and in at Nebraska as a safety. So you mentioned MJ Sherman kind of blazing this trail. I think this is a similar situation. So this is the 4th player that Matt Rhule has gotten from Georgia. Also Eric Gilbert and Jacob Hood, who Gilbert was out of the program in a short period of time because of personal issues and getting his own life in order. And then Jacob Hood has just had, of course, injury problems that derailed things for him as an offensive lineman at Nebraska. So, you hope to go 2 for 4 with these Georgia guys, and that would mean that Rhett is a hit. On the surface, he looks like the kind of player when you see what Nebraska has back in the secondary, who can come in and help them pretty quickly.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, like you said, I think most of it goes to what Nebraska does or doesn't have in the defensive backfield at the moment. And I would think they're looking to, they like the young talent they have, especially at corner. There's a couple guys who have played for him at safety that are still going to be back there, but adding, we don't talk about it enough probably in the defense that Nebraska is running. Like it's just a really demanding spot, I think, to play. You have to make a lot of calls and you have to fit in a lot of places and you're asked to do a lot of difficult things. So Nebraska needs a player who, has some experience and definitely can be trusted to be in the right place at the right time. Frankly, that was not the case this year on Nebraska's defense a bunch of times with their safeties. So need to get that position going this year. This feels like a good add to at least throw into the mix of depth that you have back there.
Yeah. Marquise Buford is a safety. He had to play corner some a lot this year, especially after the injury to Tommy Hill. Malcolm Hartzog is a safety. He had to play a lot of corner this year. So Nebraska needs to figure out what it's doing at corner. They have Sierra Wright coming back. That's probably going to be a spot, I think, along with offensive line, where you want to find somebody who can come in and play right away. At safety, the aforementioned Buford and Hartzog can be players at that position. They like Caleb Benning, who redshirted this year. They like Ramir Stewart, who is a second-year player in the program. They like the true freshman Braylon Prude and Larry Tarver. But it's young and somewhat untested. So they prioritize this position. New defensive backs coach Addison Williams prioritized this position along with John Butler, the defensive coordinator. Of course, he knows what Nebraska needs at his position group. They like Caden Vermas, the signee out of Millard North. But, Rhett, 2 years at Georgia, he's going to understand what it takes to play this, to be a part of a big time program. So, and he was a part of a big time high school program, like I said, at Las Vegas Bishop Gorman. Was originally committed to Notre Dame before flipping to Georgia in that recruiting cycle of 2023. So, on the surface, you have to like what you see here, and it was a position of need. Yeah. Maybe not as glaring as on the line, but you start to dig down into that Nebraska roster and see what it's got. It needed a safety.
Okay, so where else do I think we're both in agreement in this conversation that they got a starter or maybe even two on the defensive side of the ball. They got a starter at wide receiver. Where else are the high priority needs at the moment? I mean, I don't know how the answer is not tackle at this point. Yeah. It is, but like, how desperate is that need for Nebraska to get a starter or two on that offensive line?
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, it's you don't want that to be the reason that your offense can't function the way that Holgorsen wants it to function in 2025. And for all of the experience, I'll say this again, we'll talk about it as the offseason goes on. For all of the experience that Teddy Prohaska and Turner Corcoran bring to the table, they can't be your top of the line only options. If you get them, that's great. It's a bonus, but the injury history there is impossible to overlook. And honestly, if Turner Corcoran makes the decision to come back for a sixth season, and you make the decision to bring him back for a sixth season, if you're Nebraska, despite the good work that he was doing early in the year at tackle, and it was fine before he got hurt. The best way that he can help you is on the interior of the offensive line.
Agreed.
And you are in much better position as an offense if you can put him there as a depth piece, as a starter, as a swing guard. You want to work him at center? Fine. Nebraska's got to figure out what it's going to do at center for 2025. So I think center is a huge issue. I don't know that you can just give the ball to Sam Sledge and say, okay, here you go. You're the guy. That's not comforting me at this point if I'm putting together the Nebraska offensive line, if I'm Donovan Raiola. So yeah, tackle and center on the offensive line. We talked about corner a minute ago. I think they need a corner. I think they needed to get a corner out of the portal who has played at a high level and isn't going to be a liability. Nebraska had a liability at cornerback too often this year in games where UCLA, for instance, when it just kept moving the ball up and down the field and maybe not scoring a ton of points, but keeping the Nebraska offense off the field. Huskers didn't have a corner to a good enough corner to go and stop the Bruins from converting third downs. They have to fix that problem.
All right. And then, I mean, running back, is that another place where it feels like they can add? Yeah.
So you got a quarterback, you got a receiver, you need a running back. They're going to look at Quentin Ives, I think, in this bowl game. He's been in the program for 2 years, and it's been few and far between the opportunities that have come up for him. Rhule has raved about him since the middle of his redshirt year or before. Like they like what they have in him, but he has to be able to do pass pro, and he needs to be a complete player to play the running back spot. I think they'll take a look at Mekhi Nelson in the spring, assuming that he's still around. But you have Emmett Johnson as your one reliable piece, and you need another reliable piece without Dante Dowdell.
Yeah, still time. I do like where Nebraska's at for the moment, though. I don't think they've like wildly exceeded expectations, and I don't think they've fallen underneath them as well as far as what could be expected to get out of the portal at this point. They've gotten good depth pieces. We didn't really talk about the defensive line guys that they've gotten.
Not blown away, but I mean Nwaneri, yes, but the other two I think are potentially depth. Yeah, I mean the transfer from East Tennessee State, he's a proven college player at the FCS level, and I think he's closer to being in the rotation than the ad that Nebraska got from Mississippi State, who has not played football for a couple years.
Right. So they were going to need probably 12 to 15 players out of the transfer portal, and you probably need a quarter, a third of those to be like starter caliber, and so they're on a good track for that right now, I'd say.
Yeah, and I mean, as players unexpectedly go in, and you'll probably have some more of this after the bowl game, and Dowdell fit into that category, then you just add that onto the top of the 15 or so. So if it was December 10th and you heard the head coach say you're going to need 14 or 15 players out of the portal, and then Dowdell goes in, and Nate Borkacher went in after that point, who was not someone that Nebraska was necessarily expecting to go in, although Rhule says there really are no surprises and that all of this stuff is brewing beneath the surface. Let's just say they were hoping that they could keep those players. You're not necessarily counting them among the 15 or 14 that you were planning to add 2 weeks ago. So it might be up around 17 now, where they sit coming out of Christmas and then in early January. You got 12 more days that players are allowed to go in the portal, or I'm sorry, to take visits. The portal closes on December 28th. So this Saturday, unless you're in a bowl game or the college football playoff, then you have 5 days after your team's last game. So there's lots more time. There'll be players going into the portal well into January once bowl season wraps.
All right, everybody. Thanks for being with us today. Appreciate you making this your first listen. We have your second listen all lined up for you as well. It's the Locked On Big Ten podcast. You can find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.